Hey guys, it's GirlGotGame. Welcome back to London Detective Mysteria, where we are doing Seiji Kobayashi's route. Friendship route, that is, because he didn't get a romance one, which I'm sad about. But anyway, we're going to see what it's got in store for us. From what I understand, we're going to be playing back through a lot of Kenichiro's route. So I'm going to do a lot of skipping. I've already skipped to the East Comes West chapter. And I'm not starting from the beginning. I'm just going to go through the scenes where Kobayashi has like a lot of dialogue that he's engaging in. And then I have a actual walkthrough of choices to get to his ending because I wasn't sure how much I have to be on Akachi's route to get to Kobayashi's route. So anyway, I got some notes and things, but this is when we first meet the boy, so let's reintroduce ourselves. Having approached the suspicious ship as close as I felt comfortable, I then hid out of the way and surveyed it from afar. People were disembarking in large numbers before my eyes, carrying goods off the ship with them. What worried me was that a number of them didn't seem to be in very good health. As if they barely had the energy to spare, they were collapsing or sitting on the ground as soon as they reached dry land. I feel like I should be calling a doctor more than Scotland Yard. Where on earth could this ship be from? So many of them have black hair. My mind was churning as I observed. Ah! I was startled by two faces popping before me. Their appearance was so unexpected that I hadn't much time to react with anything more than a pitiful cry. There they are.
Who is she? She seems to have been watching us.
Looks like an ordinary girl to me. Well, ordinary as far as here, I'm sure. Never seen a real blonde-haired, blue-eyed beauty in my life.
I've no idea what they're saying. What language is that? Before me was a petite boy with chestnut hair, staring at me with eyes as generously large as his grin. Next to him stood a slender, silver-haired boy wearing spectacles. Far from the gaiety of his partner, he gave me the immediate impression of being a cautious sort. And whatever language they were speaking, I wasn't familiar with a single word of it.
She has blonde hair and blue eyes, yes, but I think it's premature to be declaring her a beauty.
So you say, but I'd wager you thought, she's a fine sight for sore eyes the second you spotted her.
If you think such a mundane idea would even cross my mind with circumstances as they are, then you don't know me very well.
What could they be talking about? They couldn't be talking about how to get rid of me now I've witnessed them sneaking into the country, could they? To add fuel to the fire of my worries, the silver-haired one had a foreign weapon at his waist. Was I to be on the receiving end of that? To suspect this alone made me gulp.
Hi there. Are you alright? You look as white as a sheet.
Oh? Well, that I understood well enough. What a shock. You know English?
Sure do. I can hold a conversation as well as the next. Did you see that? She understood me. She understood me, Ken-chan.
I did, yes. More importantly, how many more times must I tell you to stop calling me Ken-chan before you understand that?
Ken-chan?
There isn't a soul alive who would treat me with the proper respect upon hearing that juvenile nickname, and that will not do. Start calling me Akachi. Immediately.
Oops. Sorry, Akachi. Old habits die hard.
I'll expect you to rein in those habits with more care in the future. So, who might you be?
Oh! The silver-haired boy began speaking in equally fluent English, surprising me yet again.
Have you some business with our ship or someone on it? We could hardly help but notice you've been watching it for a time now.
Well, if I lie here and they notice, they'll surely waste no time tossing me into the sea. No, anything but the sea. All those fish could eat me. And the sewage. I can't bear to think of the gutter at a time like this.
Lest there be any misunderstanding, I would note we arrived here legally after fulfilling all conditions required under the law. Will you stop staring at us as though we were criminals?
So you are, allowed to be here? This, I came to realize immediately, was an incorrect way to word my concern.
Of course we are! Your country opened its doors to us! What a lousy thing to say to someone you've just met! I hope all Angel's people aren't as rude as you!
Be calm, Kobayashi.
But it's rude, Ken-chan!
No buts. And need I remind you that I told you to call me by my proper name? This is the reality of being Japanese in the modern world. As long as we're in this country, we must know our place.
Japanese must mean you're from Japan, I think. Now that I was able to calm down and think properly, I recall there being a country in the Far East that commonly referred to England as Engelsch. Isn't Japan a faraway island? And they came all that way on a boat? One more quick glance at their faces, and the idea was plausible enough. Their every feature was racked with exhaustion. I could only imagine the hardships they must have endured to make it here. And to think I asked them if they were allowed. Allowed! I assumed them to be criminals as soon as they hit dry land. The guilt was building the further my thoughts went. I'm terribly sorry! I should have never have said it. Oh, it was awful of me. I just received a lesson on smugglers and those entering the country illegally. I let my imagination run wild, I suppose.
A lesson? Are you a student?
Yes, I am.
A woman and a student? Then you must be of noble birth, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right. My name is Emily Whiteley. It is a pleasure to meet you. I raised the edges of my skirt slightly and presented my most refined curtsy.
Wow! So this is how they greet each other in the West. It's so elegant.
Why, thank you. Unlike his smaller companion, the bespectacled boy continued staring in silence. I've perhaps not done something more to insult you, have I?
No, not at all.
Don't mind him. He's struck dumb by how pretty you are.
That's enough from you. Still, you've given your name. It's only proper we give ours. I am Kenichiro Akachi. The noisy one with me is Seiji Kobayashi.
Well then, Kobayashi and Ken-chan, it's lovely to meet you.
That's us! Good to meet you!
I believe I introduced myself with my full name. How did you pick that up? I don't recall using it.
Was that not it? I thought I heard the word being repeated towards you earlier.
Ahem. Be that as it may, I would rather you call me by my surname, Akachi.
Oh? Is there a special reason, perhaps?
Well, that's because...
Because over in Japan, using someone's first name means you're very close with one another. He'll go beat red in the face if he hears his name coming from a girl.
Stop making up falsehoods. I simply want to be treated with respect by those around me.
Kensha Akachi wasted no time in rejecting Kobayashi's theory.
I've gotta say, Engelsch is so progressive. It never occurred to me that women would be studying alongside men here.
Does everyone study together?
Yes, I suppose we do. I'm a student in the detectives course at Harrington Academy. There are both boys and
You lot, out of our way!
What's happened?
Run! Scotland Yard will be here any minute! Leave the goods, we need to save our own asses!
A large group of men begin piling off the ship next to Akachi and Kobayashi's, each of their faces filled with desperation.
I thought as much. There is something to be said for Engelsch's police force to be this widely feared.
What?
Ah!
I jumped up in surprise at the yelp from beside me.
Damn it all! Out of our way! Now!
The men continued scrambling away from their ship, kicking cargo haphazardly out of their way as they did. That wasn't the only thing they were kicking away to and fro. The foreigners from the other ship were given the same exact treatment if they happened to be in their path.
What do you think you're doing? What sort of men attack people who don't have the strength to fight back? You cowards!
Kobayashi! Think before you act!
Seeing as he clearly wasn't the type to do just that, he also didn't seem the type to listen. And I was right. He sprinted right out in front of the men, refusing to let them past.
Stand aside, brat, unless you want to end up swimming with the fishes. Try it if you dare, but you'll be the ones taking a swim.
His words were menacing, but the size difference between the petite boy and the Englishman was readily apparent. They looked like they could knock him aside with ease.
I don't know if there's anything I can do. At this rate, he'll... I suppose I'll need to step in.
Akachi grasped the weapon at his waist.
Stay here, miss.
Akachi! He ignored me and followed in Kobayashi's footsteps, jumping before the men. Nice.
Sorry, Akachi, but you'll have to save the lecture for another time.
The two of them stood with their backs to one another. In Akachi's hands was his sword, whilst Kobayashi wielded a slingshot.
They've got no idea how much suffering we've endured to get here.
That still isn't a good enough reason to lash out at them.
Aren't you frustrated to have this happen first thing?
If I weren't, would I be standing here with you?
Akachi initially carried a look of resignation, but after adjusting his spectacles, his gaze sharpened. He returned his hand to his sword.
You're to assist me, Kobayashi.
Got it! You'll be crying to your bleeding mummies after we're finished with you.
The men raised their knives and charged at the boys. They were hoping for a swift defeat before fleeing.
You'll be the ones crying when we've routed the lot of you!
I'll leave those I don't manage to defeat to you.
That suits me!
They then shot into motion. Akachi's blade cleaved in a sideways arc before him.
Gah! Gah!
The smugglers fell to the ground one by one. Each of their faces were etched with disbelief. What? What did I just see? Akachi's counterattack was so swift I had to strain my eyes to convince myself of what was happening. He waited for his opponent to attack. Then just before they could, he was right before them and ready to strike. Seizing the opening, the hilt of his blade would make contact with their abdomen, the back of their neck, or other similarly exposed parts. By the time his blow had connected with his opponent, he was ready for the next. His movements were simply too fast for any of the smugglers to keep up with. My! This is more akin to dancing than fighting. Even standing a fair distance away and having a clear view of the action, I could only just avoid losing sight of him. His attack struck with such force that the majority fell to their knees in agony, rendered unable to move. There were a few who endured the pain for long enough to rise to their feet, but they were not prepared for this.
Gah! Damn you! Wish we could make this easier on you, but we ate all the beans and seeds we had during the trip here. You'll have to make do being pelted with stones. Gah!
These men, too, were quickly sent flying back to the ground by Kobayashi's slingshot. Together, the two of them made a perfect team, with Akachi serving as the vanguard and Kobayashi assisting him. It took little time between them for all of the smugglers to be at their complete mercy.
But bloody hell! Who are you?
We have no names to give to the likes of you.
Akachi gently slid his weapon back into its sheath. His stance was so elegant that he wouldn't have looked out of place at a high-class social gathering. I'm stunned. They fought so many men without any outside help. Effortlessly at that.
We did it, Akachi!
Kobayashi ran joyously over towards Akachi, and with apt timing, more were to join us in our celebration.
Miss Whiteley!
Two of my schoolmates arrived to see to it that I was well. Holmes! Watson!
Truly, you are a marvel. Did Mr. Mackenzie not warn us against wandering off alone? I fear your brain will be the one puzzle I'll never be able to solve. Not that I want to.
I hope you two haven't fretted too much over me. You've not been searching for me all this time, have you? Really, I didn't intend for there to be so much fuss.
Oh, there was no fussing at all, I assure you. Your actions are always so unpredictable, they inspire incredulousness more than worry. There's no need to hide your relief. Just say you fussed plenty. You were worried you'd become caught in something after all Mr. Mackenzie said earlier. I certainly was. Bah. Speaking of which, what's all this about?
Holmes's eyes were focused on the veritable sea of collapsed smugglers. A large group of smugglers were trying to flee when 2 boys from Japan to the east decided to stop them. They routed them all like it was no trouble at all. It was a spectacular sight.
Routed? It means that they were overwhelmingly bested, Watson.
We must help them retrieve the cargo that fell into the sea as thanks.
Wait, why? We've only just arrived.
But we shan't turn our backs on people in need,
We're in for the lecture of the century from Mr. Mackenzie when we get back. Still, I can't say I disagree. Let's get helping. I see a few injured people over there. I'll ask if there's anything I can do for them. I don't have a choice in this, do I?
Thank you, dears. Together, we assisted in retrieving the cargo the smugglers had knocked into the sea back to dry land. Watson, meanwhile, did his part in giving treatment to those who possessed injuries, however small they happened to be. Upon the Yard's arrival, who had been informed of the smugglers' presence, the smugglers were left with no other position but to be taken into custody.
We're in your debt for your assistance in this matter. That gang's been a nuisance for quite some time. They've made a name for themselves bringing drugs into the country, but known as they were, we could not catch hide nor hair of them. So when someone from that ship that arrived in the country reported they'd been seen, we thought it must be some mistake. But thanks to the 3 of you, they evade capture no longer. Well done.
He's making it sound like we were the ones who did the work.
I'd heard Harrington students were visiting as part of a trip, but then you solve a crime we've been investigating for ages while you're at it. Your school bleeds its reputation.
There appears to be some confusion, sir. We were not the ones responsible for this. All we did was help the people who suffered at their hands. By the time the 2 of us arrived, they were already apprehended.
Now, no need to be so modest. We'll be certain to let your school know what you did here today.
Sir, he's telling the truth. The ones responsible were those 2 over the... As I was about to tell the man about Akachi and Kobayashi, the second officer, whose tone was a dramatic shift from light to dark compared to the first, addressed them directly.
Off with you, then! Scotland Yard will be carrying out a formal investigation here. We shan't have your sort getting in the way.
What? But we were the ones who captured those men!
Are we to believe your tall tales? What could a couple of feeble yellow monkeys do against hardened criminals? This is no place for you filthy Janese to hang about.
How can he talk down like that to them?
Try saying that again! What do you know about us? You can't even say what we are right! We're Japanese, not Jannies!
Kobayashi!
The boy went to strike the officer with a clenched fist, but Akachi grabbed him by the shoulders and forced him back.
Damn it! Let me go! Let me go!
Have you forgotten why we came here? We didn't come all this way to quarrel with law enforcement.
Others from their ship began to leave, and so Akachi forced the still furious Kobayashi to join them to break the tension. Much to my disturbance, they continued to receive unwelcome glares from the officers and bystanders who happened to have meandered close enough to survey the commotion. Akachi! Kobayashi! My darkening train of thought was only broken by a sigh from Holmes. Okay, we're gonna skip through this little piece. While they're making fun of her. Alright, now we're caught up. Akachi! Kobayashi!
Miss,
Miss Emily?
is there any reason you've chased after us?
Akachi and Kobayashi were walking alongside the others, but they stopped once I called out to them. Am I correct in assuming that you two were the ones who first reported that smuggler ship?
What makes you think that?
From how I saw it, it was like you expected the Yard to arrive. Then there's how we first met. Your companions on the ship were still unloading cargo at the time, but you weren't. You were doing so moments before, so I doubt you didn't care for the labor. That's why it struck me as odd. The only plausible answer is that you two were keeping watch.
Well, what a clever deduction. You're like a real detective, Emily.
By chance, there happened to be an article about them in the Engelsch newspaper I was reading on the boat here. It mentioned that their members sport a tattoo resembling a snake on the back of their hands.
I was lost as ever when Akachi asked to borrow my telescope after we'd landed. He didn't have any reason to look for a land in the distance, so I thought he'd gone nuts from exhaustion.
That's rather unkind of you to think. I simply found the crewmen of the ship next to ours peculiar in their behavior. They were only waiting to leave port, and yet they were much too wary, as if they were ready for battle at any moment. After the backs of their hands confirmed my theory, I asked the person who disembarked first for the port entry procedures to report them.
And you did that immediately? I was moved. Between his powers of observation and quick thinking, why, he was the one who made for quite the detective. They ought to have earned praise for their good deeds, but those policemen only hurled abuse. How can that be right? Oh, as though it ever could be right. If it's no trouble, I should like to speak intimately. I'm honored you came all the way here from Japan. Welcome to England. I presented the water and custard tart Pendleton had given me that morning to them. I'd been keeping my custard tart aside to eat later. It was always a treat to have. I'd been looking forward to eating it all day. How queer that something I would have delighted in having for myself still felt an inadequate offering. Rather than take it, however, the two scrutinized the gift as though it were absolutely foreign to them.
Is this edible?
Oh! It's called a custard tart. They're deliciously sweet desserts.
It's sweet!
Kobayashi alighted to the extent that his eyes may as well have been glittering with stars.
You don't mind if we eat this?
In fact, it would please me very much if you did.
Kobayashi, it's unbecoming for a man to be so enthused with sweet...
I get first bite!
Never mind.
The taste is amazing, Emily! You're right that it's sweet, but it's not the same type of sweet you get from Manaka.
It was prepared by my family's butler. Don't expect to find many in London that are quite so perfect.
Really? And you still let us have it? Thank you!
Akachi had been watching us with a somewhat dubious expression before he spoke up.
When I chose to set sail for this foreign land, I was prepared for how I would likely be treated here. After all, our nation's position is rather perilous. One wrong move and we could become yet another colony for the West. If I'm honest, the treatment we received earlier came as no surprise to me.
Akachi.
What has come as a surprise, however, is meeting someone like you so soon after our arrival. The journey here was an ordeal from start to finish, but I count myself fortunate for being able to meet you at the end of it.
For the first time, Akachi's mouth curled ever so slightly, and his eyes softened in what felt like his sincerest smile. The change was only visible for a mere moment, but I was captivated all the same. A great change would be coming to the classroom a few days after the trip. On the way to our classroom, I bumped into Marple along the corridor and called out to her. Okay, we can skip a little bit of this until we get to the actual introduction of them to our class. Good morning, Mr. Mackenzie.
Ahem. Class, please take your seats.
Mr. Mackenzie's voice had been hoarse since the trip, likely owing to how the poor man had to shout for hours on end. His appearance was pitiable enough at the best of times, so adding that weak texture made him seem orders of magnitude more so than ever.
First, I need to introduce two foreign exchange students who will be joining us from today. Come in.
Oh! The second I saw these new students, I was almost pleasantly speechless. Akachi! Kobayashi!
So this is your class!
Lower your voice, Kobayashi.
Oh, come on! don't pretend you're not happy to see her.
All I implied is that shouting personal matters in the classroom is inappropriate.
So you are happy.
One was naturally brimming with energy from ear to ear, whilst the other defaulted to being reserved. They couldn't have been more different.
I want you to stay quiet till I give you permission to speak, Kobayashi. Excuse the lengthy interruption, Mr. Mackenzie. Do continue.
Certainly. This is Gnitaro Akachi and Seiji Kobayashi. They've traveled here from distant Japan.
As soon as he mentioned where they were from, the classroom erupted with curious whispering and admiring sighs.
They were to be in someone else's care for the duration of their stay, but tragically, that person passed away of illness before they could make it here. But in light of their achievement shortly after their arrival, our academy has chosen to take them under its wing.
So it's all come together. When we went to give our apologies to the teacher, I reported every possible detail I could recall regarding the incident with the smuggler ship. That, of course, included Akachi and Kobayashi's involvement. I'm so pleased he took the time to find and enroll them here. Good show, Mr. Mackenzie. I always knew he was the head of our course for a reason. For a brief moment, the lanky, wearied figure of Mr. Mackenzie seemed almost dazzling. Almost.
It may take them time to adjust to a new environment and culture. Please, I ask that you do what you can to make them feel welcome. And now, there are 2 empty seats waiting for you. Sit down, gentlemen, if you would.
Before that, sir, I have a favor I wish to ask of you.
Oh? What might that be, Mr. Akachi?
Would it be too brazen to request being appointed as our class representative?
This coming from the mysterious new addition had all at attention. Holmes, can I ask you something?
No need. I know exactly what you'll say. You'd like to know if we have such a position to fill, correct?
Precisely. You read my mind.
As far as I'm aware, there was one. But, you see, the detectives course has always had its share of colorful characters. Making it a nasty job to unite us as one. Anyone who's tried hasn't lasted long. In short, the position does exist, but it may as well not.
I hope that was a joke, Akachi.
Akachi's request had come when Kobayashi was ready to take his seat. For some reason unknown to the rest of us, he visibly despaired at the thought.
I would never make a joke of this. We came to Engels to further the development of our homeland. To that end, we must use the limited time afforded to us to learn and better ourselves as much as possible, and taking the leisure route of studying like any other student, why, that's simply not enough. We must constantly strive to undertake greater responsibility, to achieve greater things, to expand our efforts beyond the bare minimum. It is, I declare, almost vital I assume a position of leadership.
Akachi took no notice of the astonishment from those around him. His proclamation was indeed brazen, to use his wording, but he fully intended to stand by it.
Fantastic. Oh, fantastic. This is giving everyone a fine first impression of us. I can feel the headache coming already. I understand how you are, but I don't suppose you could tone down your enthusiasm on the first day. Everyone's sure to think we're all like this.
Look at that! I've never seen such determination. Oh, but it only feels right for a man who's trekked here all the way from the Far East to be so different to the average student. Absolutely. He's the same age as us, but here he is, shouldering the future of his country like it's the natural thing to do. It's inspiring.
Holmes!
His voice carried throughout the classroom.
I've heard you are effectively the detective who represents this class, as well as that you possess a ring from Her Majesty for your abilities. As one who aspires to become a first-rate detective, it is a true privilege to meet you.
Dear me, he can't be very ordinary if he's already latched onto Holmes.
I'll say. No one close to ordinary would engage with our most baffling schoolmate. Me? Baffling? Huh. You speak nonsense. There's nothing wrong with closely inspecting or being alert of one's surroundings. It helps me to notice evidence far more acutely than the average citizen.
And here he is with a matter-of-fact quip. Those two may be quite similar, come to think of it. Holmes had earned himself a fair amount of stares right along with our foreign exchange student.
I am pleased to meet you as well, Akachi.
If I may, I want to make something very clear to you, Holmes.
Here we go.
I will not lose to you. You're the best here as we speak, but there will come a time when I become a first-rate detective and claim your place. Mark my words.
Will you now? May I counter? If becoming a first-rate detective is your aim, then don't chase someone else's shadow to get there. You should follow your own path as I do. Spend enough time musing over wins and losses, and you may become so self-involved that you lose sight of the finish line.
Is that so? Am I to interpret that a detective aims not to best others, but to be unprecedented in their own right?
Interpret my words as you wish.
I'm impressed anew. I throw down the gauntlet and your retort is to give me advice. I see a first-rate detective must also be a first-rate British gentleman. Another lesson well learned.
Akachi swiftly produced a notebook and began to scribble away.
It's hard to say if he's an optimist or if he truly doesn't realize Holmes meant nothing from that.
Ha! Oh, you don't know the half of it. You won't find another man as smart as he is simple. And I do mean simple.
I wouldn't take it that far.
No. Listen, you can't get a recipe more basic than Akachi. The first ingredient? His studies. The second, his diplomacy. Physical training is enough to be third and fourth. Then there's the most important one of them all. His spectacles.
Why those? Haha.
I've never met anyone else so humorless. Absolutely not a single funny bone to be found in his body. You know what makes him smile? Work. He's a slave to productivity.
Ah, so he's too diligent.
I'm not a slave to anything, Kobayashi. And I do hope you'll excuse my borrowing your notebook.
You did? Wait! That's one of my 7 tools! You shouldn't be using it!
You should never let your guard down, not even for a moment. Let this be a lesson to further your studies.
I wonder if we'll find out what all 7 of his tools are.
Even across the ocean you would spring trouble on others in the name of education.
I find his devotion to bettering himself quite admirable.
Yes, but this sounds less like devotion and more like obsession. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And if I may, I think you're all forgetting one sorely important detail.
Marple sharply changed the subject to grab our attention and then announced in a dignified manner.
We do have a detective without peer in our class, but it isn't Holmes. It's Emily Whiteley.
What?
Wow!
You're right. I did forget.
You never told us you were such a legend, Emily!
She overstates my capabilities. I swear it. I'm nowhere near being without peer.
When we first met, your energy and behavior piqued my interest. Now I see how exceptionally modest you are as well. They say all that glitters is not gold, but you shimmer more with every revelation.
I shimmer? I fear I don't understand.
To put it more concisely, he's saying the truly capable do not flaunt their talents. They behave as I do.
As you do. Oh, I'm sure.
I'll admit that what Miss Marple says is correct, Akachi. She does occasionally possess moments of brilliance that surpass even my intellect. I do stress occasional, but I have seen it happen. Would you look at that? Holmes praised someone! Reluctantly, but I heard it with my own ears.
These moments must truly be exceptional if someone such as you accepts them as brilliance. Perhaps it's a regular occurrence in a country ruled by a queen, but I'm moved by how the women here excel.
Seemingly inspired, Akachi once again begins scribbling in the borrowed notebook.
This is a nation ruled by Her Majesty and filled with refined ladies and gentlemen. Would it be fair to assume this enriching lifestyle is more the rule than the exception for a young British woman?
Quite fair. The concept of ladies first is bred into our culture. You must always extend a kind hand towards women.
Extend a kind hand.
And it's doubly important to understand how they think. We gentlemen can't very well extend our hand without knowing when to take lead, as I'm sure you realize.
Men have to understand how women think and lead the way.
And as soon as the opportunity presents itself, men have to strike with all their might. Strike! Then conquer! Man must defend his prize to the very end.
Strike, conquer, and defend. Well, well. I wasn't aware there were so many complex strategies lurking beneath the surface.
Is this still about women? Why must it be so violent?
Oh, it's absolutely complex. No man simply wants for the girl of his dreams. He puts in all the effort he can muster to win her heart.
Might I suggest we do something about these two?
I'm sure ladies first is more about putting women, well, first, and less about how to get them to fall in love with you.
Seiji gets it.
Selecting which information is likely to be vital is an important part of being a detective, if I may add. If he can't do that, he has a long way to go.
Wonderful, wonderful. Ambition and enthusiasm are always two qualities I love to see in a student. Very well, Akachi. I'm happy to appoint you as our new class representative. I have high hopes for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie.